The first horn split the quiet at 10:48 in the morning, sharp enough to make the coffee in my hand tremble. I was standing behind the front window of my cabin, watching a silver SUV stop at the bottom of my driveway. Behind it came a white minivan. Behind that came a rented passenger van with fogged windows and children pressing their faces to the glass. 26 people had driven 4 hours because my cousin had told them my home was theirs for Thanksgiving. The only thing between them and my front porch was a steel chain, a new padlock, and a sign that said "Prio per y, no entar y, chitu, termoval." Emily stepped out first, wearing a cream sweater and that bright, practiced smile she used when she wanted people to forget she had done something wrong. My brother Jason got out of the SUV and stared at the chain like it had personally betrayed him. Aunt Marilyn climbed down from the van in a red coat, already waving both hands in the air, as if the mountain road had offended her. Then my phone rang. I looked at Emily's name on the screen and let it ring twice before I answered. "What is this?" she snapped. I looked at the chain across the drive, the cars lined up behind it, and the family members who had ignored every warning I had sent. "That," I said, "is my answer." She laughed once, but it came out wrong. "Nathan, stop being dramatic and unlock the driveway. We're here." "No," I said. "You're not." And 26 people finally learned that a family vote does not unlock a private door. 2 days earlier, I had been eating a dry turkey sandwich at my desk in Portland, trying to finish a spreadsheet that did not want to be finished. Rain moved down the office windows in thin gray lines. Someone down the hall was laughing in a conference room. My lunch was balanced on a paper towel beside my keyboard, and I was counting the minutes until the afternoon ended. That was when my phone buzzed. I expected a bank alert, a work message, maybe a delivery notification. Instead, it was my cousin Emily. "We all voted. Thanksgiving's at your cabin this year. Make sure there's enough beds for 26 people." I stared at the message for a long time. There are moments when your brain refuses to accept plain language because the meaning is too ridiculous. I read it once, then again, then a third time, slowly, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something reasonable. They did not. Nobody had asked me. Nobody had called. Nobody had even hinted that my cabin, the little place I had bought with years of savings and repaired with my own hands, had somehow been entered into a family election without my name on the ballot. I typed 2 words. "Absolutely not." Emily replied less than a minute later. "Too late. We're already driving up." Then she sent a winking emoji. That tiny yellow face did something to me. It was not the worst thing anyone had ever sent, but it carried the full weight of every boundary my family had ever stepped over while smiling. My name is Nathan Reynolds. I was 34 years old, single, and working in finance. My life was not flashy, but I liked it. Numbers made sense to me. Contracts made sense. Doors, locks, schedules, property lines, signatures. Those things had rules. People could pretend not to understand them, but the rules still existed. Family was different. In my family, the loudest person usually became the truth. Plans were not discussed, they were announced. Favors were not requested, they were assigned. If you objected, someone would say you were sensitive, selfish, dramatic, or not in the holiday spirit. Emily was the queen of that system. She was polished, organized, and impossible to pin down. She never said, "I want this." She said, "Everyone thinks this would be nice." She never said, she said, "We all talked." She never said, "Give me what I want." She said, "Family comes first." And somehow, people obeyed. My cabin sat near Mount Hood, tucked between pines at the end of a gravel drive. It had 2 bedrooms, 1 small loft, a wood stove, a narrow kitchen, a wraparound porch, and exactly enough space for me to breathe. I had patched the roof, replaced cracked plumbing, sanded the railing until my palms blistered, and painted the kitchen cabinets a deep forest green. It was not a luxury lodge. It was not a resort. It was not a family timeshare. It was mine. That was the part Emily never liked. At my parents' anniversary dinner the year before, she had stood by the dessert table and said, "You should really open up that cabin sometime. It's kind of selfish to keep it all to yourself." I had laughed, because that was what I used to do when someone insulted me in a friendly tone. I laughed, changed the subject, and carried the discomfort home. Now, I understood that it had not been a joke. It had been a warning shot. I opened the family group chat, the one I kept muted, because it was usually baby pictures, holiday recipes, blurry memes, and passive-aggressive comments disguised as concern. There it was. 3 days earlier, Emily had written, "What does everyone think about a cozy woodsy Thanksgiving this year?" Aunt Marilyn replied, "Love it." Jason sent a thumbs up. A few cousins added things like, "The kids would be obsessed," and "That sounds perfect." Not one person tagged me. Not one person asked if Nathan had agreed. Then Emily wrote, "Great, I'll coordinate." And apparently that was the vote. A vote about my house without me. I typed into the group chat, "I never agreed to host Thanksgiving. Please do not come to my cabin. It is private property." For a full minute. Then Emily appeared. "Lol. Don't be dramatic. It's just a few days. It'll be fun. Family first. Family first." I leaned back in my chair and felt something cold settle behind my ribs. That phrase had excused too much. It had excused Emily dropping off her kids at my mother's house without warning. It had excused Jason borrowing my truck and returning it with an empty tank. It had excused Aunt Marilyn criticizing everyone's food while bringing nothing but napkins. It had excused my parents telling me to be the bigger person because I was quieter and therefore easier to pressure. This time, the phrase landed differently. This time, it was aimed at my front door. I texted Jason privately. "Did you know about this?" He answered after 5 minutes. "Yeah. Emily mentioned it. Figured you were cool with it." I wrote back, "Why would you figure that?" His reply came fast. "It's kind of too late now, isn't it? Too late. Too late for permission. Too late for respect. Too late for my own property," because they had already packed coolers and told children there would be s'mores by my fire pit. I looked at the rain on the window and realized something that made the rest of the office go silent around me. They were not confused. They were counting on my discomfort being weaker than their momentum. They were counting on me to fold, because folding was what I had done for years. I looked at the clock, 20:14 p.m. If I left soon, I could reach the cabin before dark. I shut my laptop, told my manager I had a family emergency, and walked out with my coat still half on. In the elevator, I called the first person I needed. The locksmith answered on the 4th ring. By the time I reached the mountain road, the city had disappeared behind me. Rain became mist. Mist became fog. The road narrowed, twisting between tall pines that leaned over the shoulders like old witnesses. Usually that drive calmed me. That evening, every mile tightened the knot in my stomach. My phone lost signal 20 minutes from the cabin. Before it did, I saw that no one had apologized. No one had written, "Nathan is right." No one had said, "We should not go." Silence can be an answer. When I reached the cabin, I sat in the car for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, watching dusk gather around the porch. The windows were dark. The roofline cut against the sky. The place looked exactly the same as it always had, but I felt different looking at it. For 2 years, it had been my refuge. Now it was something I had to protect. I went inside and turned on the lights. The familiar smell of cedar, wool blankets, and old wood smoke met me at the door. I checked the pantry. A few cans of soup, coffee, pasta, crackers, 1 jar of peanut butter. Not enough for a holiday. Definitely not enough for 26 uninvited guests who would expect beds, towels, breakfast, Wi-Fi, and gratitude. I was supposed to spend Thanksgiving with a friend in Portland. Quiet dinner, board games, maybe pie from a bakery, because neither of us wanted to bake. Instead, I was standing in my kitchen, imagining my cousins opening cabinets, moving furniture, letting children jump on the couch, complaining that the loft was cold, and asking me where the extra milk was. A sound came from outside. Tires on gravel. I froze. Headlights swept across the front windows. For one wild second, I thought Emily had come early. But it was Jason. He stepped out of his SUV, with a paper coffee cup in one hand, wearing a hoodie and jeans, like he had dropped by to borrow a drill. I opened the door before he knocked. "Figured you'd come up," he said. I did not step aside. "You seriously knew about this?" He sighed, already tired of a conversation he had helped create. "Emily said she had a plan. I thought she talked to you." "She didn't." "Okay, but people are already moving around it now. Marilyn has the folding tables. Eric bought 2 turkeys. Emily rented the van. Mom is telling everyone what desserts to bring. It's in motion. Did anyone bring permission?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Come on, Nate, it's family. It's one weekend." I stepped aside then, not because he had changed my mind, but because I wanted to hear how far he would go. Jason walked in, glanced around, and opened one of my cabinets without asking. He took a glass, filled it from the tap, and leaned against my counter like he lived there. That small act told me more than his words. "I'm not hosting Thanksgiving," I said. He gave me a look that was half pity and half annoyance. "Technically, you kind of are." "Technically, I own the property," and said no. "You don't have to make it a legal thing." It became a legal thing the second people started driving toward my private property after being told not to. He stared at me, then lowered his voice. "You're going to make Mom cry." There it was. Not Emily was wrong. Not we should apologize. Not I should have protected you from being cornered. Just, you're going to make Mom cry. My family's entire moral system could be summed up that way. Whoever reacted most dramatically became the injured party. Whoever stayed calm became responsible for everyone else's feelings. Jason stayed nearly an hour. He said I was rigid. He said I made things harder than they needed to be. He said the cabin was beautiful, and it was a shame not to share it. He said maybe this was a chance to reconnect. He said just let it happen, 3 different times. I did not argue much. I nodded. I said I would think about it. He left believing he had helped. He had not. He had confirmed exactly what I needed to do. The next morning, I drove 40 minutes down the mountain to the nearest town. It was small enough that the hardware store, diner, locksmith, and towing office all sat within 2 blocks of one another. An American flag hung in the hardware store window. A radio behind the counter played old country music. The air smelled like wet leaves and motor oil. The locksmith was a broad-shouldered man named Frank with gray hair and careful eyes. I told him I needed every exterior lock changed at my cabin. He studied my face for half a second. "Family situation. Something like that." He nodded. "Happens more than people admit." By noon, my front door, back door, storage shed, and basement entry all had new locks, new keys, new deadbolts, new certainty. Then I called the tow company. "If vehicles are on private property without permission," I asked, "especially if they're blocking a driveway entrance, how fast could you respond?" The dispatcher did not sound surprised. "Usually within an hour in that area. Make sure you have clear signage. Take pictures. Call us when they're there." So, I bought 2 heavy chains, a commercial padlock, a stack of weatherproof signs, and a cheap trail camera that could record the driveway entrance. By sunset, the entrance to my property looked different. Private property. No entry. Vehicles subject to removal. The words looked harsh in the cold light. They also looked fair. That night, my phone found enough signal to receive Emily's messages. "Hey, just confirming we'll arrive tomorrow around 11ish. Hope you're excited." A few minutes later, another one came through. "We'll need space for 3 cars plus the rental van. Also, can you make sure there's enough coffee and milk for breakfast? See you soon." There was no question mark. That mattered. A question mark would have admitted that I had a choice. I placed the phone face down on the table and stood in the quiet kitchen until the wood stove clicked. Thanksgiving morning arrived gray and cold. Frost silvered the porch rail. My breath came out white when I walked down the long driveway at 9:30. The gravel was damp and dark under my boots. Pines rose on both sides, tall and still. At the entrance, I looped the chain around the posts and pulled it tight. The padlock clicked shut with a sound that felt final. I stood there for a moment, looking at the line I had made. Simple, visible, overdue. Then I walked back to the cabin, made coffee, and sat near the front window with a book open in my lap. I did not read a word. At 148, Jason's silver SUV appeared. It slowed. It stopped. Behind it, the white minivan braked hard. Behind that, the rented van rolled into place and blocked half the mountain road. Doors opened. People stepped out into the cold with coolers, casserole dishes, tote bags, children, travel pillows, and the confused confidence of people who had expected my no to melt when they arrived in person. Then the sign. Then the camera. Then she looked up toward the cabin. My phone rang. I answered. "What is this?" she demanded. "A boundary. Unlock it. We're here. You were told not to come." "Nathan, don't do this. We have kids in the car. We drove 4 hours. You chose to do that after I said no. You said no like you were upset. We thought you'd calm down. I did calm down. That's why there is a chain instead of an argument." For a few seconds, all I heard was wind through her phone. Then she said, "It's Thanksgiving. You're really turning away your whole family." "No," I said. "You turned yourselves away." I ended the call. She called back. Jason called. Aunt Marilyn called. My mother called. I set the phone to do not disturb and watched from the window. At 11:20, the tow truck came around the bend with yellow lights flashing. There was no dramatic explosion. Just disbelief. Jason raised both hands and tried to explain. Emily pointed at the cabin. Aunt Marilyn shook her head like she was witnessing a crime. The tow driver listened for a few seconds, pointed to the sign, checked the photos I had taken, and went to work. He started with Jason's SUV because it was closest to the entrance. I watched the hook attach. I watched Jason's face turn red. I watched Emily look up at the cabin and understand, maybe for the first time, that my silence was not weakness. Their cars were gone within the hour. By noon, the driveway was empty again. My phone was full. Emily wrote, "I hope you're proud of yourself. The kids are crying." Jason wrote, "What is wrong with you?" Aunt Marilyn wrote, "Your parents will hear about this." They did. My mother called first. Her voice shook with disappointment. "We raised you better than this." I looked out at the trees and said, "You did not raise me to be a doormat either." That did not go over well. My father called after her. He used his calm voice, which was always worse than anger, because it came wrapped in authority. He said I had embarrassed the family. He said holidays were about compromise. He said Emily had gone too far. Yes, but I had gone farther. "Dade," I said. "She tried to move 26 people into my cabin without permission. You could have handled it privately." "I tried. They came anyway. You could have let them stay one night." There it was. The family solution. Give the person who crossed the line Just enough reward to teach them the line does not matter. I ended that call before I said something I could not take back. For the rest of Thanksgiving weekend, I stayed at the cabin alone. I chopped wood until my shoulders ached. I walked the trail behind the property. I heated soup on the stove and ate it at the small kitchen table while rain tapped the windows. At night, the silence felt heavier than usual, but it was honest. No one was opening my cabinets. No one was telling me to smile. No one was sleeping in my bed because a cousin had voted on it. Still, I would be lying if I said it did not hurt. There is a specific pain in becoming the villain in a story everyone else is telling, especially when they know exactly which parts they left out. The week after Thanksgiving, the group chat became a courtroom where I was not allowed to defend myself. People posted photos from the dinner they eventually held at Aunt Marilyn's church basement. Someone made a joke about certain people needing lessons in generosity. Emily posted a picture of a half-eaten pie with the caption, "Missing a few ingredients, like basic decency." I wanted to be above it. I was not. I stopped checking the chat. I stopped answering calls. I skipped Christmas. I sent no gifts. I spent the holiday at the cabin with a small roast chicken, a bottle of wine, and snow piling against the porch. It was peaceful. It was lonely too. Not the loneliness of being alone, the sharper kind. The kind that comes when you realize the people who are supposed to know you best have only known the version of you that was easiest to use. That winter, I started going to the cabin every weekend. Not to hide, to rebuild. I repaired the back railing. I replaced cracked tiles near the wood stove. I fixed the loft window that rattled in heavy wind. I built shelves in the pantry. I cooked real meals instead of eating over the sink. I bought a notebook and wrote a title on the first page. Things I never said. The list became 10 pages. Every joke I had laughed off. Every favor I had done, because refusing felt more exhausting than helping. Every time someone called me sensitive when I named the truth. Every time I accepted a smaller version of myself because peace seemed cheaper than conflict. By February, I was in therapy. My therapist, Lena, had plants in her office and a gray couch that seemed designed for people to accidentally tell the truth. In our first sessions, I kept defending my family while describing what they had done. Lena listened carefully. One afternoon, after I explained why Emily probably did not mean to be cruel, Lena asked, "Why is it your job to absorb everyone else's dysfunction?" I had no answer. I carried that question home like a stone in my pocket. Slowly, things changed. At work, I became more direct. I stopped writing emails that apologized before they said anything. I stopped volunteering for problems that were not mine. I said no without adding a paragraph of emotional padding. My manager noticed. I was given a new project, then a quiet promotion, then a raise. I did not tell my family. It felt better that way. In the spring, I started hosting small dinners at the cabin. A friend from work came first, then a couple from my hiking group. We ate roast chicken, fresh bread, and coffee cake. Nobody demanded the guest room. Nobody opened drawers without asking. Nobody treated my hospitality like an unpaid bill. That was when I began to understand the difference between chosen community and inherited obligation. The more I built that life, the less I missed the old one. But families like mine always reappear when property or money enters the room. In late April, I received a certified letter at my apartment. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and too formal to ignore. The return address belonged to a law office on the Oregon coast, the same firm that had handled part of my grandfather's estate years ago. I opened it at my kitchen table. My great-uncle Alan had died. Alan had been a quiet, eccentric man who lived near Cannon Beach and appeared at family gatherings only when necessary. He did not talk much. when he did. His sentences were dry, short, and impossible to forget. I had always liked him. The letter said there would be a private estate meeting in 2 weeks. Private meant me. No one else. I did not tell my family. At the law office, an attorney named Walter Kemp led me into a room that smelled like paper, coffee, and old wood. He wore a gray suit and gold wireframe glasses, and he had the calm confidence of a man who trusted documents more than opinions. He opened a folder. Most of what he read was legal language, property descriptions, asset lists, standard clauses. Then he paused and looked at me over his glasses. "This portion was handwritten by Mr. Reynolds," he said. "It is legally binding." He asked that it be read to you exactly. My hands tightened in my lap. Walter Reed. "To my great-nephew Nathan, I leave the seaside house, the surrounding land, and the trust attached to it. I do this for one simple reason. You were the only one who visited without needing something. You never treated me like an opportunity. You never performed kindness for an audience. I watched this family carefully, and I watched you most of all. You have more integrity in your silence than others have in their speeches. Use this gift however you see fit. I gave it to you because you earned it, not because you were loud enough to demand it." The room went still. For a second, I could not breathe. Walter waited, then continued. The estate included a weathered seaside house, 13 acres of bluff and forest, and a liquid trust worth $2.3 million. All in my name. No shared control, no committee, no family vote. I had expected grief, maybe paperwork, maybe an awkward conversation. I had not expected validation from a quiet man who had apparently seen everything. For the next week, I moved carefully. I hired a real estate attorney. I toured the seaside house, a gray, shingled place on a bluff above the Pacific. The paint was peeling, the garden was wild, and the wind hit the windows like a warning, but the bones were good. The view was extraordinary. It reminded me of the cabin. Different landscape, same piece. I transferred the trust into protected accounts under professional guidance. I updated title records. I hired a contractor. I installed a gate and security cameras. I followed every paper trail Alan had left and turned it into something no one could casually step over. Then I waited. I knew the news would travel. Jason found out first. "Hey, random question," he texted. "Did you get something from Uncle Alan's estate?" Not, "I'm sorry Alan died." Not, "Are you okay?" Just straight to the asset. I replied, "Yes." 2 minutes later, "What did you get?" I answered, "That is between me and the attorney." The silence that followed was louder than an argument. 2 days later, Emily emailed me. The message was polished, which meant she was in strategy mode. "Hi Nathan, I heard Uncle Alan may have left some things behind. I wanted to kindly ask whether you would be open to sharing information with the rest of the family. It would mean so much for everyone to have a piece of his legacy." I did not respond. The next morning came another email. Just following up, a few of us were wondering if the coast house might be usable for a family weekend, maybe as a memorial celebration. Totally just brainstorm. Let me know. She added a smiley face. Always the smile. Always the softness around the blade. I forwarded the email to my attorney. Then I made my quiet revenge official. Not revenge like shouting. Not revenge like throwing insults in a group chat. I wanted something cleaner. I wanted to remove every handle they had used to grab my life. First, I created maintenance funds for both properties. Access was limited to me, and a named successor chosen in writing. No shared decisions. No informal family use. Second, I rewrote my will. My executors would be 2 close friends. My extended family would receive nothing. Third, I leased the seaside house through a private agency for long-term executive retreats and film crew housing. Serious contracts. Serious deposits. No casual weekends. No emotional bargaining. No, just this once. A producer from Seattle signed a 6-month lease for nearly $14,000 a month. That income would cover taxes, repairs, and then some. Finally, when the adjoining forest lot beside my cabin came up for sale after a failed development plan, I bought it. It cost a meaningful portion of the trust, but it bought silence, privacy, and a buffer no family vote could cross. I did not build on it. I did not need to. The land itself was the answer. Memorial Day weekend came bright and windy on the coast. I was at the seaside house, wearing an old flannel, pulling weeds near a trellis Allen had built decades earlier. The Pacific rolled below the bluff in long silver bands. The new gate stood at the drive, black metal against the green grass. 2 cars appeared on the side road. Emily's car came first. Of course, Mitch sat beside her. Their children were in the back. Jason's SUV followed behind. They parked near the gate and got out like guests, arriving at a resort they believed confidence had reserved for them. Emily checked her phone, probably searching for a code. Mitch opened the trunk as if he planned to unload. Jason walked to the keypad and started pressing buttons. I stood behind the hedge for a moment, not hiding, watching. It struck me how naturally they moved toward things that were not theirs. Emily called, "Nathan." I stepped out from the garden path. Her face lit up when she saw me. "There you are. You didn't say this place had been updated. It's gorgeous." Jason gave an uncomfortable wave. "We figured since you hadn't said anything, maybe a family weekend wouldn't be too much to ask." "You figured wrong," I said. Emily laughed lightly. "Come on, don't be dramatic. The kids need to stretch. We brought food. We'll be gone Monday. You are not staying here. You are not coming in." Jason frowned. "Is this about Thanksgiving again? You're still holding on to that." "This is not about Thanksgiving," I said. "It is about everything, and it ends today." Emily's smile thinned. "Nathan, it's a family house. Uncle Alan would not have wanted you to hoard it." "Uncle Alan left it to me," I said, specifically, "in writing. If you are confused, my attorney can send another copy." Her eyes hardened. "We just assumed you would do the right thing." "I did." Mitch looked from me to the gate, completely. Jason stepped closer. "Nate, just let us in. You can be mad later." At that exact moment, the gate intercom buzzed. A voice crackled through the speaker. "Mr. Reynolds, this is Charlie from Vanguard Security. We received a perimeter camera alert. Do you need assistance?" Emily's face changed. I pressed the button. "This is Nathan. It is my family. They were just leaving." A pause. "Copy that. Would you like us to come up?" I looked at Emily. For the first time, she did not look confident. She looked pale. "No need," I said. "They're on their way out." Then I turned back to them. "You do not have access to this house. You do not have access to the cabin. You do not have access to my trails, my land, my time, or my silence. I bought the adjoining lot. I registered the easements. I installed cameras. Everything is locked down. There will be no more drop-ins, no more family weekends, no more votes about things that belong to me." Emily's voice cracked. "You can't just cut everyone off." "You already did," I said. "When you turned my boundaries into jokes. When you treated my home like a public resource. When you used guilt like a debit card with no limit." Jason stared at me. "So what? You're just out." I met his eyes. "I'm free." For the first time, I saw the realization settle over him. Not just that I meant it. That there was nothing left to negotiate. No group chat. No mother crying on the phone. No phrase like, "family first," that could open the gate. Emily stood there with anger on her face, and maybe the smallest flicker of shame behind it. "Goodbye, Emily," I said. She turned, told Mitch to get the kids back in the car, and slammed her door hard enough for the sound to bounce off the stone pillars. Jason lingered. "This doesn't feel right," he said. "It is not supposed to," I replied. "That is how growth feels when you have avoided it for too long." He opened his mouth, then closed it. A minute later, both engines started. Gravel crunched under the tires. Within 2 minutes, they were gone. No explosion, no dramatic scene, just absence. I stood by the gate until the dust settled along the road. Ocean wind moved through the grass. Pine and salt filled the air. My phone buzzed once with a security alert, confirming the vehicles had left the perimeter. That evening, I opened my laptop and wrote one final email to the extended family group chat. "Dear family, effective immediately. I am stepping back from all family gatherings, group decisions, and inherited expectations. My properties are not available for use. I will not reply to requests for access. If you contact me about this, please understand that silence is not an invitation. It is a boundary. Wishing you peace." Nathan. I clicked send. Then I closed the laptop and poured myself a drink. There were no immediate angry replies. No speeches, no public debate. Just silence. And that was how I knew it had worked. They had not simply lost access to a house. They had lost access to me. For most of my life, I had been the easy one. The quiet one. The one who did not make waves, because fighting felt too expensive. I had mistaken being useful for being loved. I had mistaken being agreeable for being safe. Not anymore. Now the property lines were clear. The doors were locked. The silence was mine again. And so were the waves. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more.